think that this marks the end of a year-long journey that we took with our projects and our partner Ecoris on this part of operational knowledge, and I will come back to that later on. And at the same time, it marks the beginning of what we will hope will become a stepping stone for cities and other actors to understand what monitoring and evaluation stands for, what constitutes a best practice and why and to what extent. And in the end of the day, to help cities and urban authorities to understand the impact and the result of their innovative intervention. And this was for us at the core of our motivation when we launched this activity a year ago, to help, as I said, cities to grasp what they were doing. And on top of that, there are three main aspects which are very well grounded to the fundamentals of what UIA stands for. And these three main aspects make this activity very relevant and very pertinent also for the future. The first of this aspect is the fact that monitoring and evaluation is one of the 4 criteria that we evaluate our projects against. So we call it measurability. And this is where we seek to understand how projects intend to measure, monitor, assess, and evaluate what the innovative aspect of conduct such activity in terms of novel approaches, novel methodologies, novel ways to conduct monitoring and evaluation. Then there is the aspect of monitoring and evaluation growingly becoming and getting its designated place within the work plan, the implementation work plan of projects. We see this now more often than in the past, where monitoring and evaluation has its own, often a work package dedicated on that one, meaning that actors, cities, urban authorities understand the importance that they should give in such activities. And the third aspect is the fact that monitoring and evaluation is one of the 7 cross-cutting implementation challenges that we are constantly looking into, also through the work of our the UIA experts. And also it shows the path of the work that we will do in the future in terms of knowledge management. And this brings me to my last point before I give the floor to Ecoris, on sharing a bit the bigger picture of what we're doing today. So there are 2 types of knowledge that we wish to extract from the work that we are doing with our projects. The one we call thematic knowledge, and this is part of the knowledge that has to do with particular topics. Last year we worked on mobility and housing. This year we aim to work, for instance, on just transition and other topics as well. And then there is the aspect of the operational knowledge, where we are looking into each of the 7 implementation challenges. And this is exactly where this particular activity falls into. For the future, let me also say that we wish to see how this will be enhanced at the European level between cities. We wish to support and facilitate the knowledge sharing between cities based on the findings of this report. And yeah, this is all from my side, and I'm looking forward to the official launch of the platform today. Thank you very much, Raf.
Thank you very much, Iraklis, for setting the scene and reiterating the importance that this specific aspect, the specific dimension of monitoring and evaluation has for UIA as a whole, but even more importantly for the cities that are working with us, that are experimenting and testing on a daily basis new, bold solution to societal challenges on the ground. Okay, let's move now to Marie-Josée Zondag, who, as I said, will tell us a little bit the behind the scene of this report. She will explain us how we got to this final point of the report, how we collected the different information from project, and how we made sure that the voices and the experiences of the project are there. And this is just for me to remind that, of course, all the work that we do is always grounded in the evidence of what the project are doing. We are not here to produce theoretical knowledge. What we try to share and to capture and share is the evidence and the experiences that we can see and we can test with the cities, and therefore this is always backed by concrete efforts on the ground. Marie-José, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raffaele, for this excellent introduction. Well, I would like to show you what we actually did. So if we could go to the next slide, and I see a box, a gray box on the slide. Not anymore now. Okay, if you could move to the next slide. And I see several people are having their videos on. Please put off your videos if you're not presenting. Thank you very much. So it's absolutely a pleasure to be here to at this nice moment to officially launch the monitoring and evaluation platform. But before we do that, as Raffaele indicated, I will explain a little bit about the journey we had. So just before the pandemic, it could well have been one of my last trips abroad for work. Was that we had a kickoff meeting. The Urban Innovative Action Secretariat asked us, as the chorus, to capitalize on the good practices on monitoring and evaluation for urban innovative projects. And because I think all who are involved in innovative projects know that this is a specific type of projects, and really with the objective to learn, to see what we can learn from these, from the urban innovative actions projects. So what we did is we started first with doing some literature review on what is how to actually evaluate innovation, and which resulted in a paper on a theoretical paper. And after that, we did a desk study. So we looked at the documents of all 55 operations from the first to the third call projects. So all 55 urban innovative actions projects. This resulted first in a long list of 20 projects, which were discussed with the Secretariat. And from that, a short list of 11 projects was selected. And we had hearings digitally from August to October to discuss with the cities and their evaluators what are actually details, how did they do and experience monitoring evaluations, what are actually lessons that can be learned. We try to focus on lessons that can be useful for others, of course. And in the online platform that you will see in a moment, we included 9 case studies. So the whole study, I think, has resulted in a rich document, which is completely online and which you can also download, which has the theory of evaluating innovation. Secondly, there are all kind of case studies, so 9 case studies in which you can see what approaches they used and what lessons they had. And thirdly, we are also having lessons learned on governance approaches, data collection, and horizontal issues. Also to show you which you can see on the map which projects were actually selected. As it is a small map, I will just briefly name them. So Antwerp, in Antwerp, the Courant project was selected, or we took good practices and lessons from them. In essence, Curing the Limbo, Aveiro, Steam City, Barcelona, BMINCOM, from Brussels, the Calico project, from Paris, the Oasis project, from Rotterdam, the Bridge project, from Utrecht, the URLP project, and from Vienna, the Core project. And with that, I would like to finalize the journey we had and actually share with you the launch of the monitoring and evaluation platform at the UIA website. So that brings me, I will share with you the website so I will go to share.
Thank you, Marie-José. While you are sharing your screen, let me just say a few words. First of all, for really thanking you, all the team of Equaris, for the dedication that you put in this work. As I said, the process itself was impacted by the COVID, especially for what concerned the hearings, where we really wanted initially to go and meet the city in their, let's say, their own environment, where we could have also met all the actors that were involved in the evaluation process. Well, we managed to have this type of hearings anyway, but of course, probably we lost a little bit of the human touch, which for us at the UI Secretariat is always a very important golden, let's say, golden rule. Just another point from my side, just to say that also the selection of the project that you have just mentioned was also, well, first of all, the Y55 project, because now we have 86 projects, and this is because when the study started 1 year ago, we were just let's say the Call 4 and Call 5 project that are the latest project that have started with us, were really at their starting block. So we thought that they were not, let's say, mature enough to have already some learning and knowledge regarding monitoring and evaluation. And the second point is that, of course, when selecting the project, we tried to cover as much as possible the diversity of topics and thematic and policy area that we address with the UA. As you know, we are aligned thematically with the urban agenda for the EU topics. So it means that we cover today more than 14 policy area of intervention, and we wanted as much as possible to show such a diversity in the case studies that we were looking at in the study. Okay, that's now up to you. Here we go. This is the first time that the platform is going to be public. So it's a bit of emotion now to see it up and running. There was a lot of work done by a lot of people behind the scene, on top of you, also all the colleagues here, Amélie, Ophélie, and all the people in the Secretariat. So here we go. The floor is yours, Marie-José.
Yes, thank you for these words, Raffaele, and also really thank you for our very pleasant cooperation. So here we go. So you might know the UIA website, which is not only trying to be useful for those who want to apply, but also really tries to be useful for the projects themselves and for any other cities. So they have built the Knowledge Lab. So when you click on the Knowledge Lab, then you will get to the following page where, and of course now it's being a bit slow. We just tested it and it was quick. Okay. That's always what happens when you do not want to happen it to happen. Maybe the Secretariat can take over for this moment, because it's not running now. Amélie or somebody else? Yes, thank you. So if you would go to Amélie showed immediately the right page, but if you stay on the top, Amélie, for a second. So when you would go to the button UIA Knowledge Lab there, oops, just go back to where you were. Then you will be able to see challenges, and then you if you click on monitoring and evaluation, you will get to the website that you just saw. I will meanwhile see if it works from my end. Seems it's rather a problem with the site than it's. Okay.
Yeah, probably Marie-José, you can also just start explaining a little bit the structure of it while we try to reconnect it. This is too hot out of the press, so we are still.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to restart the link and to stop sharing, and when you have the right link that you show it again. So basically what we have in the site is that we for monitoring evaluation we have 4 sections. The theory about so there is about the study, there is the theory, the practices, and the case studies, as we just also showed a moment earlier on the slide. Maybe Jagoda, it's good to explain what we can find under the section theory.
Lovely, thank you so much. I really apologize to everyone, but I think that was expected. This is when there's so much emotion and expectation for technology to be on your side. This is when it crashes. But it's back again. So we are at where you see the left hand side. When you're looking at the screen, you have the bar where there is about, theory, practices, and case studies. So this is what Marie-José was signalizing as the general structure of the report, a very interactive report full of quotes and videos, and I think many interesting elements. So we would like to start from the part theory that Marie-José has mentioned a moment before, which was our starting point really on this journey. But theory is an awfully big word, I think, because we were hoping to, what we did actually, we did a scan or a review of literature and grade literature, but I think mostly what we were looking at was any information and feedback from practitioners in the field of evaluating innovation. So we went through all those materials, and we have produced this I hope helpful to an extent paper placed here under theory, where we were trying to see what's out there in the field. So what are the trends? What are the challenges that people talk about right now? And most importantly, what is the general advice or recommendations or warnings that we can already, before engaging with the cities here with UIA, that we can already identify. So this is something that we offer here in the theory section. So we strive not to have it as an academic essay. I mean, the whole purpose of the entire report throughout is for it to be useful and engaging, and we hope we manage that. A couple of issues came up already in the theory, interestingly, and I think this is very valuable. They were reflected throughout the report. So, I mean, the issues that we have identified in literature, they were equally brought up by the cities in our hearings or in our discussions, which I think shows many things, but mostly the fact that the people or the evaluators that we had the opportunity to engage with throughout the process are just very well prepared and informed and on top of things. And that's why this exercise has been so effective from our side, that we had, you know, this tremendous opportunity to engage with people who actually know what they're doing. So obviously I cannot really, I would love to, because I'm so excited about this project, but no one will allow me to go in detail about this section. So I think if I could just single out 3 points that I think are really important just to frame the whole discussion or the whole seminar today, would be that one of the first things that we have established, not surprisingly, is that evaluating innovation projects has its own sets of challenges and limitations, right? And I think we need to have it, and we did have it at the back of our minds, is that many of the people we were engaging with, evaluators and project partners, they are really excellent at evaluation. And then, you know, they would easily tell you what kind of approach and what kind of data collection and what other instruments would be very effective and useful in evaluating a project, should that not be an innovative project, right? So these are not just regular policy implementation evaluations. These are very challenging and exciting but difficult projects to evaluate. on the one hand, they are innovative, and evaluating innovation has this huge dose of unpredictability, right? So it's not business as usual that you can predict more or less. Obviously, every project has a dose of unpredictability, but here the dose is really huge, and you have to account for that. And this was one of those challenges faced by evaluators. But the second thing is that these are not venture capital small projects where you have the freedom of trying and failing. We are talking about huge amount of public money, of projects being embedded in urban authorities. So a great dose of accountability that is needed here. And I think this has been a great balancing act on the side of the evaluators and the projects, really, to have it scientific in the sense of this being a piloting or innovation, but on the other hand, of this being a large-scale public policy project. So this is one of the things. Obviously, anyone who has done anything with innovation knows that you really cannot evaluate it, right? There is a huge limit to what can be evaluated in a given or short span of time, right? So I think in practical terms, what this theory bit is trying to put forward is that be reasonable in what you are hoping to achieve or what you are promising to achieve, right? Because these are innovative projects, for most part, social innovative projects, and social innovation takes ages, right? So the projects here were tackling very difficult issues of social cohesion, issues of empowerment. And you cannot really say if someone has been empowered after 1 year or 2 years of participating in activities. So I think on the one hand, we are in this bit addressing those macro issues, but we're trying also to be practical in the sense, be reasonable, be very frank upfront in how you formulate your evaluation questions, the bigger questions, because then you are expected to deliver based on what you promised initially. Other issues that I'm obviously not don't have time to address, but I encourage you. Hopefully the piece will promote the conversation. But the second aspect before moving forward, which I think again has to do with the fact that the UIA projects that we've been looking at are just purely amazing, right? That they tackle the really difficult issues. They tackle the issues that are politically sensitive. They tackle the issues of integration of migrants and asylum seekers. They tackle the issues of climate change in urban setting, which is becoming increasingly a political issue because the demos of the city has very clear expectations towards the city authorities to make cities livable and comfortable in 21st century. So a lot of those issues are political, are ethical, are challenging, right? On the top of that, they're innovative. On the top of that, please add the scale of those interventions. And now we are just starting to unpack the tasks ahead of the teams. So I think the ethical aspect has been, on our side, very clearly marked in this theory base and also very strongly reflected by the cities. And this is something we'll address later on. And I think this has been amazing. The sense of understanding of the weight and importance of evaluation, that this is not an academic exercise per se, right? We are part of a bigger policy conversation about very difficult topics and topics that have very practical implications for people and for beneficiaries, many of whom are vulnerable. They are refugees, they are people struggling with poverty. So I know I'm running out of time, but I'm really excited. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what we're touching about in this part. Hopefully
okay. Thank you very much, Jagoda. So before we go into the practices, could you just very brief, because you indeed run a bit out of time, say very briefly, how did you come to these 4 sections of practices?
Okay, so these are the 4 sections because we needed some sections, right? So this is our idea of organizing this wealth of material that we have. Obviously, many lessons that we will be discussing could easily fit in any of the sections. But the way we have approached that, or sort of our process, was to translate all the wealth of information that we have gained from the cities through the documents and through the hearings, so the discussions, into very practical lessons, right? So the whole concept of the report is that this is a list of numerous lessons, which I hope are practical. Some of them are, more general, in a sense, have an evaluation approach, which may seem obvious, but not to everyone. So I think this is also something that was difficult for us, because obviously this report will be read by people who will find half of it, very obvious because they've been doing it. But we're trying to balance it out to make it engaging for people who are, well ahead, but also for people who are just engaging with this type of discussions, and that will be useful. So here we have identified what we consider best practices among the cities in how they have approached and tackled those numerous challenges that I have just mentioned. But I think what is also important in those lessons learned, and that was very valuable, we have tried to translate the reflection of the cities, right? So after those, years, really, in some cases, of experiences, we had the great privilege and pleasure of people reflecting of what could have been done better and how they want to, warn or advise other cities of what to do. And this is the collection of lessons learned that we have here.
Okay, thanks so much. So let's then move towards the actual practices. Adela, after you drafted after the theory paper was drafted and case studies selected and hearings with the cities, what did you actually discover for the evaluation governance? And maybe Amelie, you could go to evaluation governance and click on lesson 2.
Exactly. Thank you, Marie-José. Thank you, Amelie. First of all, I would like to start to define what do we mean by evaluation governance. Broadly speaking, we understand this term to encompass 3 elements: the people responsible for the evaluation, the roles and relations with other partners, the processes that connect people, specifically communication and coordination mechanism, and the resources available for evaluation. When analyzing the UIA case studies, we noticed that the evaluators were closely involved from the beginning, and this brings several advantages from the project, for the project itself, for the evaluators, and for the implementing partners as well. So if we have a look on the left-hand side of the evaluation governance webpage, we see that we have several lessons that we have listed there. And if we click on lesson number 2, exactly, thank you very much, Amelie. We have noticed after analyzing the UIA case studies that it's important to involve the evaluator in the project early on. From the point of view of the project, engaging the evaluator as early as project development or inception phase has a positive impact on the evaluability of the project. It creates an opportunity to come up with a better intervention design, and it also facilitates the establishment of an appropriate monitoring and evaluation framework. For example, related to the intervention design, the analyzed case studies show that evaluators can help partners to reach common or better understanding of their objectives, especially when interventions integrate multiple partners from various sectors, like it was the case for projects such as Current, SteamCity, Bridge, or URLP. While in some projects, evaluators did not consider that it was their role to bring everyone exactly on the same page, like it was in the Current project, they can certainly add value by bringing ideas closer if they are involved from the start. Based on their experience, evaluators can provide a different perspective on how much and what exactly is achievable within a given project, setting realistic expectations for results and impact. When it comes to establishing the monitoring and evaluation framework, involving the evaluators from the start would allow them to support the implementing partners with developing project indicators, especially those related to higher level outcomes, which can be both time-consuming and challenging, such as was in the WASIS project. The evaluators can help implementing partners with defining the necessary data and sources, like it was in the BMI Income project, or they can help with setting up processes to ensure consistent data collection, such as it was in the Curing the Limbo project. The evaluators can also support the implementation partners by ensuring the collection of relevant and quality data. And this is important as data unavailability can be a challenging obstacle in evaluation. So all these advantages work from the point of view of the implementation of the project. From the point of view of the evaluator, bringing them into the project early on allows the evaluators comprehensive insight into the work done from start to finish. This level of knowledge can be hard to recreate for someone that becomes involved at a later stage, especially in complex and innovative interventions such as the one financed by the UIA. From the implementing partner's point of view, involving the evaluators early on has a positive influence on the perception of the evaluator by other partners. Since the evaluator is someone that at the end of the day will express a judgment about the conducted work.
Okay, that's very interesting. Is there another lesson which is maybe good to share on governance?
Yes, we discovered a number of interesting lessons in governance, but another one that we would like to talk about is lesson number 6. If Amelie could go to it. Thank you very much. And this is create the conditions for a collaborative space. And we lost the website for a second. Oh yeah, perfect. We're back. If you could go to lesson 6 in the meanwhile, and I will start presenting it. So another important lesson that we have observed following the is that it is important to create conditions for a cooperative learning culture. Our analysis of the case studies showed that in all of them, partners worked in a collaborative, open, and learning-oriented manner, building a shared culture which facilitated both the implementation and evaluation of the complex innovative projects that were the projects that they were implementing. This cooperative and learning culture was fostered on one side by plans to continue or upscale the innovative solution later on, such as in the cases of projects like Calico, Bridge, or BM Income, but also by the culture of the UIA itself, which comes to show the important role that the donor can have in fostering a certain type of project mindset. In practical terms, collaboration between partners was facilitated by processes that connect people, specifically meaning various opportunities to meet. Such opportunities were given by the creation of steering committees representing all partners. They created a regular platform for exchanges of information and feedback. Those exchanges were supplemented by various other platforms, such as lower-level meetings, workshops, and more one-on-one relations, which were particularly intensive in the initial stages of the project and evaluation development. In some projects, even more opportunities were created for the evaluators to participate in cooperation and exchanges of information. For example, in the Brussels Calico project, the evaluators also participated in various committees, such as communication committees, strategic committees, and so on. What is important to mention is that these meetings opportunities created the condition for reflection on what worked, but also on what did not. A cooperative and learning culture also brings the advantage of allowing the project to quickly adjust when needed. This was the case of the Vienna Core and Antwerp Courant projects. In the case of the Core project, their activities were regularly monitored to SWOT workshops and SWOT reports, which provided an immediate insight into the performance, including unmet needs of the beneficiaries. The result of the SWOT analysis gave rise to immediate modification and adaptation, such as the introduction of childcare to like women to attend the activities as well. In the case of the Courant project, the project introduced shorter tailor-made educational trajectories for young refugees when the evaluation findings showed that some of the beneficiaries of the project were eager to start working as soon as possible. However, creating and maintaining a cooperative and learning culture requires a lot of effort. This should be acknowledged and taken into account when assigning resources to the project evaluation.
Okay, thanks, Adela. If we move up, we can actually also see that there are videos, and I would like to share with you one of the videos very briefly, just a fragment. So you can see here.
Marie-José, maybe you would like to personalize the video sharing because we can't hear the sound.
Go initially, everybody had their own evaluation framework. So all the partners had their own goals, outputs, outcomes, and some even had a theory of change. And at some point, we realized that although everyone was measuring what they were doing, we needed to sit down all together and define our common goal in this project. So we put together a quality assurance team, which gathered once a month, and all partners were represented in this team. And we did a lot of workshops. We spent a lot of time together finding the questions that we want to answer in our project and defining our common goal. This helped a lot our evaluation methodology, and the fact that all partners were represented also helped us better define our methodology. It really helped to have such a team, and a team that is dedicated to the evaluation of the project and to its results.
You are muted, Marie-José.
Yes. Thank you. So let's go back to the next practice. So for each of the practices, there is a video with the most important lessons. So if we go to evaluation approaches, what could you learn there? What did you discover that is maybe interesting to share, Adela?
Indeed. First of all, I would like to clarify what is an evaluation approach. The term evaluation approach does not have a commonly agreed definition, but for the purpose of this exercise, we understand it as a conceptual analytical model, a way of structuring and undertaking analysis in an evaluation, and not as a specific method or technique. So we had a look at the 9 case studies that we analyzed, and while there are multiple evaluation approaches that a project can follow, there were 3 most used by the projects that we have shortlisted. And one of this approach is the theory-based approach, which appears in this page as lesson 5. If you could go to it. Thank you very much. So learned after analyzing the case studies is that when choosing your evaluation approach, you might consider a theory-based approach. A theory-based approach has been variously defined, but with a degree of simplification, we can say that it is grounded in and follows an explicit project theory. A theory-based approach is advisable to use if one is interested in analyzing the project's contribution to change, as well as wanting to answer questions such as how and why your project works or does not work. A theory of change approach offers an explanation as to how activities are believed to lead to outputs to results, and eventually how all this contributes to wider intended impact. A characteristic of theory-based approach is that it provides information on the intervention's context, risks, and assumptions. And now, as my colleague Marie-José is going up and down the page, you can actually see, or will be able to see, various change models employed by this type of approach, and you can actually consult them on the webpage. Several case studies have chosen to implement an approach based on the theory of change as their main approach, especially the projects focused on social policy. This was the case of projects such as Courant and Utrecht URLP. Other projects, such as Rotterdam Bridge, chose the theory-based approach as a complementary approach to the quantitative analysis of microdata that they carried out during the evaluation. Projects that opted for a theory-based approach did it because this approach works for a complex setting, such as innovative interventions, which still require causal relations to be established. And it is also flexible and collaborative enough to include the perspective and assumptions of various stakeholders. It also allows for aligning and integrating the partners' ideas about the project's objectives and offers enough space for learning to take place within the project. However, as mentioned by the Utrecht URLP project, theory development can be very time-consuming. For this reason, project evaluators underline the importance of allowing time for the preparation stage of the evaluation process. Despite its flexibility, a theory of change approach can still be somehow limiting for innovative projects. UIA finance interventions have a pilot character. They develop in a dynamic circumstances involving high unpredictability, with many factors being outside partners' control. Under these circumstances, it is difficult to establish at the outset a linear path of how things would work throughout the project. And in this sense, the theory of change could be trying to prematurely solidify something that is essentially still fluid and possibly better left that way for the time being.
Okay, thank you, Adela. So next to the theory-based approach, which the link from output result impact is very important, what other approach could you explain that is being used by innovative projects?
I would kindly ask you to go to lesson number 4, the counterfactual approach. So another widely used evaluation approach by the case studies was the counterfactual approach. This approach to evaluation aims to answer the question of whether an intervention worked, which makes it particularly suited for evaluating outcomes and impact. This is different from the previous approach, the theory-based approach, where we were trying to understand why an intervention worked and how it produced change. The key to the counterfactual approach is the comparison between a treatment group and a control group, which involves repeated measurements at least before and after the intervention's implementation process. These conditions are hard to create, as the group should be rather stable throughout the experiment, preferably, and should not experience distorting influences. But in exchange, this offers the most robust way of attributing causality between an intervention and the observed results, especially if it is based on experimental design, meaning random assignment of people to a treatment and a control group. The counterfactual approach based on an experimental design was used in the Barcelona BA project. The project conducted 3 types of quantitative surveys for the purpose of its experiment in both treatment and control groups. As it can be observed, using a counterfactual approach can mean substantial data collection effort, making it a costly endeavor. The counterfactual approach can be problematic also for practical, ethical, and political reasons, especially if interventions are focused on social policies involving vulnerable people, such as young refugees or pupils from a disadvantaged background. Some of the analyzed case studies considered the counterfactual approach, but eventually decided against applying it in practice. This was the case of the Antwerp Current project, which during the design of the evaluation methodology didn't know if they would be able to establish a control group. In the case of the Rotterdam Bridge project, it was considered politically unacceptable that in the case of pupils coming from the same district, some would receive the intervention, not. If you are interested in evaluating impact and would like to use the counterfactual approach for a project, analyze all of the project circumstances early on to determine whether this is all possible. Further down the line, consider whether it would be ethically and politically acceptable. If so, analyze whether you have sufficient resources to gather robust data. Finally, think about whether you are only interested in determining the presence or lack of impact, or whether you want to understand why and how your intervention worked or did not work. The counterfactual evaluation will not provide many answers to the last 2 questions and will have to be complemented by other research efforts, such as maybe a theory-based approach.
Okay, thank you. So, and next to this counterfactual approach, in which you compare which is excellent for seeing what has really come out of the project, what is the third approach next to the theory-based approach that you explained earlier on?
The third approach that we noticed it was widely used was the action research. And this is lesson 6. If you may go to it, please. Yes. As defined in the evaluation plan of one of the case studies, Athens during the Limbo project, action research means research informed by social actions and leading to social action. Action is taken to improve practice, and the research generates new knowledge about how and why improvements came about. Basically, it's a very hands-on and attentive research practice. Implementation of this paradigm embeds learning and feedback loops in the evaluation structure. For this reason, the paradigm can be well suited to evaluation of innovative projects whose trajectories and outcomes are not fully clarified, where not only accountability, but also learning are key. As mentioned previously, this project was used by the Athens Curing the Limbo project, but also by the Brussels Calico project. Additionally, action research promotes stakeholder participation. At the practical level, it means that all partners are involved in the evaluation, as indeed was the case with both of the projects named. Being participatory in nature, action research also inspires to go beyond just the partners and strives to involve other stakeholders, in particular beneficiaries, when it comes to input and feedbacks. Ideally, stakeholder participation should also involve contributing to decision making about the research agenda and the project's course. The nature of action research also means that action researchers gain increased influence within this paradigm. The evaluators of Brussels Calico noted that the increased power that the researcher gains within this paradigm provoked ethical questions. With the ability to influence the course of action also comes considerations of responsibility, weighing of interests and values. The power to stimulate action highlights the need for appropriate subject matter, research skills, and other competencies on the part of the action researcher. Since action researchers are essentially insiders of the project, they should be able to rely on a body of knowledge to preserve a sufficiently critical stance throughout the project.
Okay, thank you, Adela. I think this is quite interesting on the evaluation approaches. Let's then move to the other one of the other evaluation practices. So if we go to data collection, there in data collection is one of the important elements in evaluation and monitoring, both qualitative and quantitatively. So Jagoda, can you explain a little bit more about the data collection, what is important in there?
Thank you so much. So data collection is this element of practice that we have identified the biggest number of lessons, because I think this is where we get practical. Hopefully we get practical. No time really to cover most of the issues, and hopefully there is a wealth of material here. I think if I was to focus on the kind of general message of the data collection section, I would start with lesson 5. Randomly really, which is emphasizing, and that was the experience of all the cities really that we have engaged with, of the importance of mixed method approach, right? So really, even if a project, given its character or preferences, even if a project has a strong focus on quantitative or qualitative data collection, it is really important to have a mix of both, right? With the quantitative methods obviously being so important for evidence-based policy making. And again, I'm going back to the fact that we are doing urban policy here. So the quantitative data showing trends, showing, identifying gaps in data, showing this macro level is important. But at the same time, we are in innovative projects. So qualitative data collection is equally important to understand the why and how and why not, even more importantly. So this is I think one of the core messages of this section, and then we unpack it in what we mean by qualitative and what we mean by quantitative and how this can be tweaked and adjusted. But I would say if we want something to be taken from it, then yes, mixing the both is important. Another lesson that would be lesson 4, jumping up and down, which builds again on the whole message of this seminar today, is flexibility and ability or readiness to adjust, and that has to do also with data collection, because obviously we encourage a strong preparation or inception phase. We encourage a lot of thinking and careful design of data collection. However, things happen. COVID happens, protests happen, dropout rates increase, whatever happens. And I think building on what Adela was saying about governance and learning culture and this very strong communication, they all support this ability or possibility of adjusting the data collection methods. And we have seen those moments, and they were very precious within the projects that we have talked about. So if ethnography initially was planned, but it's impossible, it will be replaced with qualitative interviews. If survey was conducted, but there is an assumption that the second round of survey will not be really a good approach, then we are doing interviews again, right? So, I mean, being flexible and being really tuned to the project dynamics is really essential for good data collection process. So that would be this kind of second main area. And the third one It's lesson 12, and that is specifically about the quantitative data collection, because then we try to kind of go down into qualitative and quantitative. The issue with the quantitative data is that really make sure you know what you will be able to work with, right? And for instance, in Barcelona minimal income project, there was understanding that there's a wealth of data on beneficiaries, and truly there was a wealth of data on the beneficiaries, and it was actually accessible to the evaluators. However, they soon realized that there may be a lag between what the data shows and the actual circumstances of the families. And since that project had to do a lot with vulnerability, and selection of participants meeting the criteria was so important, the evaluation team had to really invest efforts in verifying whether the statistical or the administrative data is apt. Equally, for instance, in the Rotterdam Bridge, and I'm finishing here, there was the issue of data being accessible, but it was not the evaluators were not able really to pin it down to individual beneficiaries. So that was again requiring, you know, re-evaluating what can be done with data. So this is the kind of lessons we offer here, hopefully quite practical in this section. On data collection, if we're moving to another section right now, which is probably
yes.
So we are moving to the last section here, the horizontal issues.
Yeah, what could you tell us about the horizontal issues? What is actually meant with horizontal issues?
Yeah, so as much as the data collection is quite self-explanatory, the horizontal issue is our, you know, internal talk. We call it horizontal issues because these are the issues or elements of practice or approaches that could not be really pinned down only to, you know, to the governance or only to data collection. So they really come up across all the three sections before, or sometimes they are, you know, standalone issues. So horizontal issues really have to do, in broad sense, a lot with vulnerabilities. And this is, you know, this is lesson 1, for instance, that we have here, and lesson 2 to an extent. They have to do with vulnerabilities because, as we were saying before, many of the UIA projects deal with vulnerable groups, right? So evaluation and engaging with them and collecting data from them has to take into account vulnerabilities, and that was beautifully reflected on through by the evaluators that we spoke to, or the projects that we spoke to. The vulnerabilities and do no harm has to be really high on the agenda on the evaluation from the design, because there is a certain, you know, amount of vulnerabilities you can predict, but also you can realize things along the way. And that again goes back to the data collection and flexibility. You are not married to what you came up with, you know, during the inception phase. Good evaluation is responsive to the project dynamics, and that has to do with vulnerabilities as well. One lesson that I would like to bring up just quickly here, because it's not all roses. So as I was saying, there was a lot of reflection when talking to the cities. That would be the lesson. I don't know which lesson, that's not really important, but something that we advise here in a very practical terms is writing an ethical code of research or an evaluation. So this is something that we have not really in a very formal way found in any of the city studies. We have found a lot of reflection and a lot of awareness of it, but I think this is something that we as practitioners of evaluation here at our, you know, 5 cents, we encourage the cities that will start evaluations to try to develop the ethical code or research code that should also be a living document that brings those issues together, the issue of engaging with beneficiaries, the issues of how data will be presented, you know, this broader public discussion. So these are the points that we address here in the horizontal issues. No more time really to go through them, but I think even if many of them are not very practical, we very strongly advocate that cities, you know, take them into account and consider them throughout the phases. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagoda. Okay, then lastly, we have been referring to many examples, so I can imagine it's a bit dazzling for everyone. If they would like to read a little bit more about one case, what could they do?
Well, Marie-José, I would advise them to go to the case study section.
Okay.
So if we could go back.
Yeah. So the case study is here.
Exactly. Could you please click on it? And you can see
Yeah.
that listed one besides the other, the 9 case study that we studied. If you click on it, you will see on the left-hand side that all of the case study have the same structure. So we have a first section about the project, where we address issues such as the objectives and the context in which the project came about. Then we have a second section on evaluation governance, where we have a look at the project partners and their involvement in the evaluation process. So basically, who did what, how did, and the challenges that they might have encountered related to timing and budget. The next section is the evaluation process section, where we look at the project's general approach to evaluation as well as its approach to data collection. We have basically 2 subtitles in this section, the general approach, as you could see, and also, if you could go a little bit lower, the approaches to data collection. Then the next section of the case study is the horizontal issue section, where we addressed the issues that Jagoda briefly just mentioned. And then the very last section is the lessons learned section, where we summarize the assessment of the monitoring and evaluation, its features, elements that make it a good practice, as well as listed some valuable lessons learned. So the main difference between the practice, the lessons learned section, and the case study is the fact that while the practice section has an overarching and comprehensive view of the 9 case studies grouped around the 4 themes, the case study have an individual look at each project in part, setting the project within a context, detailing its objectives, and exploring their evaluation governance process, horizontal issues, and detailing the lessons learned.
Well, thank you, Adela and Jagoda. I think here we can declare the monitoring and evaluation section of the UIA website opened. And we go back to Raffaele, who will explain why we had a little bit problem at the beginning.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much to all of you, ladies from Ecoris. It was a very rich and I hope inspiring guided tour on the platform. Indeed, we had some issues, but actually this is not because the platform is brand new, but simply because we just got the news that a huge data center just burned down next to Lille, where probably some of the data were hosted. And this is something that I would say resonates a little bit with one of the lessons about the uncertainty and unknown also on data collection, that you have to adapt to the reality. But anyway, we were lucky enough that now the website is stable enough. We will make sure that it will remain stable, but even more importantly, we will make sure this website and this platform will be used by many urban practitioners and stakeholders in Europe after that. And some of the ideas on how this knowledge might be used after this launching will be also discussed and raised during the panel discussion that we are having after this 5 minutes break that we would like to have right now, just for you to stretch your legs, take a cup of coffee, and then come back with all your attention for this very interesting panel discussion which is ahead of us. So it is 11:05. We reconvene and past 10 past 11 here, and we immediately start with the panel discussion. Thank you. Okay, here we go again. Let's start back and let's move to the second part of this webinar. Let's move to the panel, where we have the chance to have three great guests with us today. As I said in my introduction, the aim of this panel conversation is to open up the conversation, to link our findings, our lessons on monitoring and evaluation to other relevant initiatives that are going elsewhere outside of UIA, but also looking at the main lessons of UIA, of the report that we have just launched from a different perspective. It is my pleasure for this panel discussion to have with us, first of all, Sjorge van Heerden, who is from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission and who, among many other things, is also the main author of the chapter on monitoring of the recent handbook on sustainable urban development that the GRC launched a few months ago. Together with Sjorge, we have also Hedy Adams, who is an URBACT expert, who is today, for those of you who have already seen the initial agenda, who is also here to replace Adele Bucella, who unfortunately could not join us today. Hedy has many hats. Today he's wearing the URBACT hats. So he's an URBACT expert doing many things for URBACT, but in particular working on the capacity building activities of the URBACT program. And finally, we also have the pleasure to have with us Stefano Marta from the OECD, who is the person leading the OECD work regarding localizing the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a major initiative that the OECD has been running for several months and years now. The way we have organized this panel is that each panelist will start by presenting her work, and this will be then followed by an open conversation with me and the other panelists. So basically, we have three series of conversation, all within the same panel discussion. And we will start with Sjorge from GRC, who will present us, first of all, some of the main recommendations that were included in the handbook of GRC on sustainable urban development regarding monitoring. Before giving the floor to Sjorge, let me just say that her perspective for us is very important. First of all, because it brings a different notion of scale of intervention. In UIA, we are looking at a project, although complex project, but still, let's say, a scale of a project, whereas the handbook of GRC and the work that GRC has been doing together with DG Regio looks more on the scale of the strategy of intervention that cities are implementing thanks to ERDF or European funds in general. But also, and that's very important for us, Sjorge will bring us also a very clear looking forward perspective toward the work that many cities in Europe will be starting doing very soon in order to prepare the strategies, the sustainable urban development strategies that will be implemented over the programming period 2021-2027. So it's a great pleasure to have Sjorge with us. Sjorge, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Rafael, and hello everyone. Of course, thank you for participating and listening in, and also my congratulations for the great work of UIA and Ecoris, of course. As you said, my name is Sjorge van Heerden. I'm employed at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is basically the in-house knowledge and support service of the Commission, and we provide support for a wide range of EU policies, among which sustainable urban development. And one of our recent outputs in this respect, supported by DG Regio indeed, is the Handbook of Sustainable Urban Development that basically looks at the strategies implemented between 2014 and 2020, but indeed also with this outlook to the upcoming programming period. So the handbook is primarily written for local authorities, managing authorities, practitioners, but also other relevant stakeholders. And it's actually structured around 6 main building blocks or chapters. And we consider each of these building blocks a key component of sustainable urban development. So you can think of governance, territorial focus, cross-sectoral integration, but in line with the event of today, one of these building blocks is monitoring. And for each of these building blocks, the handbook tackles the main issues and challenges that are related to this topic, and it tries to offer the reader useful examples, best practices. We provide data, we provide a lot of links to external resources, and also recommendations for each of these chapters. I will like to share with you a selection of these recommendations for monitoring because the chapter is far too dense to present everything. But before I get into that, just let me point out that we have a dedicated webpage for our handbook where you can easily navigate between the chapters, but also it links you to Stratboard, which is an online database that actually provides a wealth of data on all the strategies that are currently implemented within the EU. Okay, so as for the recommendations, so first of all, it's recommended, highly suggested to depart always from this logical framework, whereby you move from the needs that need to be addressed. And after you have assessed these needs, you can identify the specific objectives that are needed to get to those needs. So a specific objective can be to reduce the number of road traffic incidents. And then following these specific objectives, you can design and construct your indicators, which can be, in this case, can be the number of road traffic incidents per month. So, but clearly for many administrations, a lack of human capacity or a lack in methodological skills can be an issue when you set up this monitoring framework or when you need to construct indicators. So therefore, we also recommend that you try to involve local universities, local research institutes, because actually they might also be interested in the data as well. So you get a win-win situation. Now, also one of the key challenges of integrated strategies and monitoring those is to combine the measurement of the specific sectoral domains together with the assessment of the additional effect of having this integrated approach. It can be challenging actually to capture this additional effect, but it's recommended to at least to explore ways or to take into consideration how to do this. Now, furthermore, strategies can also produce tangible and intangible effects. So examples of a tangible effect, of course, is something like decrease in air pollution. A less tangible effect, like also mentioned before, is the increased social cohesion within a neighborhood or the increase in the perceived quality of life. And whereas intangible effects are often measured using qualitative data, tangible effects are also often measured by using quantitative data. And now, especially when measuring these intangible effects, it's really important that you take timing into account. It was mentioned before as well, because as you can imagine, an increased social cohesion or feeling of social cohesion in a neighborhood is not something you expect to measure overnight. So, and once the data have been collected, it's really important that you structure them in a very clear way. So you use one central file or program with backups, I'm not kidding. And also we advise you to create a dashboard. And basically a dashboard, it's an easy to read overview of the key monitoring data you have, showing the current status and progress towards your targets for the various indicators, and this all in a visually appealing way. So another broader challenge when monitoring urban strategies is to align their objectives with higher level agendas. Many of those are fitted within national agendas, supranational, regional agendas. And in this respect, it's advised to establish cooperation between local authorities to create strong subnational mechanisms for monitoring also the higher level agendas. That's it for now. Thank you
very much, Sorge. Indeed, they are all very relevant points, the one that you are bringing forward, and indeed, it all resonates also a lot with the lessons that we have been presenting so far. So the hope here is that really these two pieces of work will reinforce each other's and will really help the cities in the preparation of future strategy. Here, I have just a couple of questions that, well, it's one question, two in one, let's say. My first question is regarding, from your point of view, how important would be for cities to set up this logic of intervention or monitoring framework as early as possible in the process. And here, what I want to stress is this time issue, because it's fine to have this monitoring approach, but how important and how helpful might be to have it upfront in the process. And then I would like just to pick, because this is very interesting for us, this idea of measuring the integrated approach. This is something that we have not addressed as such in our report, but UIA projects are, by definition, by nature, integrated projects. So how would you see what could be one way, there are many, of course, but one way for cities to capture the added value of this integrated approach instead of just monitoring each of the pillars of intervention?
Yes, very interesting questions. I'll try to provide an interesting question answer as well. So how important is it to start early? I would say it's very important with the monitoring approach. First of all, also with the logical framework, it really forces you to think about your practical desired end result. So it forces you to think in a very structured way. So this is a clear advantage of that. Second, I think it also provides timely information on progress. So in itself, this allows for a quick identification of possible issues and maybe also refocusing of priorities when needed. In this sense, you can even say that a monitoring system is also a sort of crucial early warning system. And finally, I would say monitoring should always be seen as an exercise that benefits from time, because the more data you have over time, the more structural measurements you have over time, the better your insights are and the higher the chances you are actually also are going to have valid measurements of progress or impact. And I would say also in a good case example, the monitoring does not stop. So it's something that you can actually take along with you to the next project, or you can benefit from a previous project or strategy in that respect. And then referring or coming back to how to measure this additional integrated effect, it's super important, it's super interesting, and it's also very challenging. So we don't have the solution yet. I think it's very important that we start thinking about it, because more and more strategies, integrated projects are there, and we will certainly benefit from all the material that we get. Two ways. One is actually that you first, indeed, you look at all the sectoral monitoring, and then you see, maybe based from literature, where are the interactions, the possible interactions or the synergies that could have taken place based on theoretic assumptions. So you can maybe start looking at interactions between one or two dimensions first, and then you start to proceed and see how maybe the sum of all parts has been greater than the whole. But also there are methodologies, but then I think you would really also need to include research institutes that can be developed, but these require advanced research skills. Mainly it's macroeconomic models, so that can allow you to do that. Also counterfactual analysis in this respect, so you can see maybe there are territories where there are only a few sectoral projects, and you have the territory that is similar, that has the integrated approach. Finally, I think there's also another additional effect from integration that is not so much about the effects on the measurements, but more about the effects of the process, which can be you have built more connections. There's evaluation of pooling of funds and resources, which appeared very beneficial doing this integrated approach, and more effective cooperation. So this is another benefit that, or additional effect that might be there that you can measure.
Okay, thank you very much for such a rich insight. Before just bringing eventually Eddie and Stefano to react on some of those things, I would just like to say that we are very happy also to say to all participants here that there are a number of ongoing discussions with GRC for joining forces with UIA in the next few months in order really to try to help as much as possible the cities that are preparing for new strategies, taking stock of all those knowledge that we are discussing and sharing today, and what you did already with the handbook. Eddie, Stefano, you have some comments on this specific aspect of approaches? Yeah, Eddie.
Yeah, thanks, Raffaele. Hi, Sergio, great to see you. And thanks for the presentation. And obviously, you're very close to the work that you're doing, which is a really important set of resources. I guess one of the things I was wondering about was the question of data. And we live in this kind of age of a superabundance of data, and the conversation we're having now would be very different even from the one we'd be having at the beginning of the programming, the last programming period. So we've got this kind of, the world is our oyster, and that creates huge opportunities, but also creates big challenges in terms of knowing what we need, where we get it, how we use it. and we could talk about this for a long time, but some of your initial observations about what impact is this having on the way we work and the way we need to think in terms of this this new relationship we're having with data right now?
Well, in my opinion, thanks, Annie, by the way. Yeah, good to see you too. No, but no, in my opinion, having this wealth of data is still a very positive development. Although I see it's challenging because, of course, the question arises: how can you pick the correct data? Is it registered data? How reliable is it? You always have to check the sources. Also, privacy issues, of course. So there are things you definitely need to take into account, but in a way it has changed our way of working because it's much easier now to harvest data and information about the territories that you're working in. So with all the challenges that are there, I think it's a very good development, and we just need more experience and also maybe better processes of how to deal with this privacy, how to assess that data is reliable, because this is actually a very important point. It's quite hard to assess this. So, but once we have these in place, I think we are set to go for an optimistic future with that.
We will keep the conversation regarding data in a few minutes after Stefano's presentation. Here, just I want eventually to do whether, Stefano, you have something to add on this, let's say, setting up the approaches from the very beginning and how important this is.
Yeah, I think thank you very much for the presentation because it's really enlightening. My point is a question. A point that is very important for me is really the qualitative dimension of the data, and also to use the qualitative data to capture these intangible effects that you mentioned. So this is something that we are really, I will talk about it later in my presentation, how the SDG is doing that. Which data are you using, which tools are you using to collect this information, and how do you process them, particularly if you create a dashboard? Is there a space also for this qualitative data in the dashboard, or is more in the narrative of the analysis to be useful?
Thank you. Yes, well, maybe it's good to make the distinction that we have a dashboard that provides an overview of the strategies, but that's more of a descriptive overview of all strategies in place. And then the strategies itself, they have the data they work with. So they will be the ones that own the qualitative or quantitative data for the strategy. So we don't have direct access to that. But in terms of how we assess the need for more qualitative data, I think many of our strategies have a social dimension with attitudes, perceptions, and beliefs. So it's definitely an important part also of sustainable urban development strategies. And we also offer advice how to transform your qualitative data into more quantitative data, so it can actually fit within your dashboard. So using scales, well, maybe this is something also you will elaborate further on, but basically this is how we support it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much to all of you. Let's move to the second, let's say, conversation, to the second part of this conversation. I will give the floor to Eddie for him to introduce a little bit the work that Urbact has been doing for many years now on helping cities in the policy design, and therefore also helping city to grow capacity regarding monitoring and evaluation. Let me just say that, of course, again, here, your perspective, Eddie, for us is very important. And this is because we believe that the nature and the aspiration of this report on everything that we are doing regarding knowledge is to then use those contents might be used and might fed other the activity that other organizations will be doing regarding capacity building. So for us, it's very important to establish linkages with organizations like Urbact or GRC, who will then bring this knowledge, let's say, down to the practitioners and will help them reusing this knowledge.
Thanks, Raffaele. And again, congratulations to you and to the to MT and the Chorus team for a really fantastic set of resources, which I'm looking forward to diving into. It's an important addition to the repertoire of tools we have across all of the work we're doing. And the structure looks great, by the way. I really like the way you've packaged the what's a complex set of information. Yeah, so the eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted I'm not Adele Bucella. I'm here because Adele was taken ill, so I hope Adele is making a speedy recovery. I hope you're not watching this, Adele. If you are, get to bed and don't be doing this when you're supposed to be off. I'm here talking about the URBACT program's perspective on today's theme of monitoring and evaluation. For those of you who don't know URBACT, we are a transnational cooperation program supporting networks of cities across Europe. We have about 64 live networks at the moment. We also have 5 new ones announced this week in collaboration with UIA, where we're looking to transfer the results of the first round of projects. And also, interestingly, a project on SDG localization approved this week. So lots of touch points with the different contributors to today's session. I just draw your attention to the slide in the top left-hand side. You can see the kind of project management cycle that we use with our networks. It kind of looks, if you look at that cycle, you think the logical place to start would be analyzing a problem. And in fact, that's the door which many of our city partners walk through in the beginning. They have a shared problem, a shared issue they want to explore together. They then walk this journey, and part of our support to them is to provide the tools, the framework, the language to help them do that successfully. Although this looks like we come through the door of the problem, just picking up on one of the things that Shorty mentioned, it's really important to start with the end in mind. And we always underline to cities and to projects at the start, think about what success looks like at the end. Think about how this journey might pan out, play out, and think about how you might use your own language to describe that. We have a strong commitment to the participative principle. What does that mean? That means in practice, we'll have in a city involved in an URBACT project, we would expect all of the relevant stakeholders to be around the table. So if that's an urban mobility project or a migrant integration project or a circular economy project, you'd expect a different profile of participants involved in that process. But the key thing is we expect them to be collaborating along the way. That's not always easy. As we know, we mentioned this difficulty of measuring integration. And if you're working across departments, different departments have different targets, different language, different ways of doing things. So this notion of pushing out beyond the usual silos is really important, as is creating shared metrics. And I think Antigone mentioned earlier this notion of a common goal, helping stakeholders to work together to define things they share, things that they can have a strong sense of shared ownership around. So a lot of the work we're doing is about creating the frameworks for our cities to do that. It's also about demystifying the process. This can be a very technical, sometimes intimidating part of the project cycle. And there are technical dimensions, and we need experts, and we need that deep expertise. So it's about knowing where that is and how we mobilize it effectively. But it's also not about outsourcing responsibility for that and saying this is a black box thing, we don't understand it, we'll just sort of outsource this to someone else. So for us, it's important that our cities and our partners that they have a basic understanding of the concepts, and we're using words like indicators, outputs, outcomes, results, so that lexicon is familiar to them, they're comfortable with it, but also equally they're able to impose their own narrative and describe success in their own words in a way that they feel a sense of ownership around, and that's not imposed from outside. Because I think one of the other things about monitoring and evaluation is sometimes it's seen as something which is external and it's done to us by others. So I think there's a kind of mindset shift here about it's not for them, it's for us. And this is why it matters, and this is why it's important. So all of those things are quite deep-seated, they're quite cultural, they're psychological. So we have a range of tools and products and methods that we've been developing over many years now to support cities to do this effectively. You can see on the screen a reference to our toolbox launched in the autumn of last year. Essentially, it's a one-stop shop online space to find all of our resources. We have a specific section looking at measuring results. And if you dip into that, you can look at how to define objectives, how to define indicators, how to monitor your implementation. So again, a framework to enable people to ask the right questions, to create the right sort of language that's comfortable for them. Alongside that, we create spaces for peer-to-peer learning. We think that the learning by doing is a strong component of what we do, bringing cities together, bringing stakeholders together to share experiences is a very powerful tool. I remember one of the summer universities we did many years ago being in a session with partners who were working through this process in a simulated way, and a city from the Netherlands talking about at the beginning, well, we need this data, and we just contact the mayor's office to say, how do we get this? And a Bulgarian city saying, well, you can't just contact the mayor's office like that. So it created this really interesting conversation about, putting yourself in other people's shoes, asking why we do things this way and other people do things other ways. So an important thing for us is to create those shared spaces for cities to learn together. Gradually, we're doing that online. So you can see the reference to the Urbact e-University, which is the successor to the Summer University. Again, looking at ways which even at the local level, these stakeholders who in many parts of Europe still cannot come together and work together physically, looking at ways in which we can transpose our tools to work in these challenging situations that we still find ourselves in. A couple of just final points. So one is, in terms of our innovation, we've been doing some work around gender equal cities, looking at new frameworks to measure other aspects of what sustainable integrated urban development means for cities. So we are also pushing ourselves to try and build on the work that we've done so far. And I guess the final maybe 3 messages for me to leave are, many of us have been baking during lockdown and involved in making cakes. So as the Americans say, in terms of monitoring evaluation, bake it in, don't frost it on the top. So think about how you bake it in from the start and make it central to what you do. Second thing would be facilitate shared ownership of the process and the metrics. So really encourage people to think of this as ours rather than this is someone else's who's bringing this in. And the third one is describe success in your own words. Understand the technical aspects, but be clear about what the narrative is to describe success in your own terms. So I'll stop there and hope that's been useful.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Yeah, it's been useful and rich. Basically, we have already answered some of the questions that I wanted to ask you, but that's totally fine. And in particular, I had one question regarding the importance of the participative, let's say, culture and of collaboration around monitoring and evaluation. But I think that you made the case very clear, and this is very understandable because this is also at the heart of the Urbact approach regarding policy design, about involving stakeholders, bringing in other voices, and let's say also the unusual aspect of it. On your point, I will just probably to stress 2 points which were very important for me and very also resonates with our lessons. One is this idea of the defining a common understanding, and that's why it's so important to bring all around the table with, of course, the right, let's say, specialized skills to drive the process, but also making sure that everyone is having some ownership of the process of monitoring and evaluation. I think this is very important, and this is also somehow linked to another point that you made very clear about demystifying this monitoring and evaluation approach. I was also putting some comment in the chat where unfortunately we still see many cities still perceiving such a monitoring and evaluation just like a bureaucratic or another administrative layer to be added. We keep having questions from cities, do you like my indicators? But I don't need to like your indicators. You need to make sure that your indicators are telling you something, and therefore this idea of learning, which I think it's very important, which was also present in your question. Well, let me just still have a question for you, which is regarding this capacity building. You showed the very rich, let's say, portfolio of activities that Urbact is doing regarding capacity building. Do you think that in the future capacity building activities of Urbact, this dimension of the monitoring and evaluation will remain as a central part, and how you see also from from, let's say, the demand side of cities? Do you still feel that there is a demand from cities regarding having support and tools on this specific aspect, which is the monitoring and evaluation?
Short answer is yes. I think the key thing is we need to listen to cities. So we need to have our antennae open to see where they're getting stuck. What aspects of this are they struggling with? Where can we help them? Where can we add value? I think all of that's about trust and creating shared spaces where people, because sometimes you have an emperor's clothes thing about this where everyone nods and pretends they understand all the technical language, but in reality they're going, I have no idea what these people are talking about. So how do you create that space where people say, actually, we're fine on this, but we're really struggling with this. So it's that continuous dialogue, Raphael, which you create within a community. So the short answer is yes, but it's never static, it's ever evolving, and it's, for all of us, it's still work in progress.
Great. Sorge, Stefano, if you want to add something specifically regarding this, either on the participative nature that a monitoring and evaluation approach should have, or on the need of capacity building and how you see from the perspective of your organization regarding your, let's say, beneficiaries or audience, how high is in the priority for capacities, the monitoring and evaluation part?
I can start if you want.
Please.
So I think I will focus more on the participatory approach because I think this is really what is key. And also at the OECD, we are more and more moving from an approach where the OECD Secretariat is producing the report and sharing the results to an approach where our projects are real policy dialogue between the OECD, the countries, the city, and the regions. So I think the component that to stress several times on the participatory approach, the stakeholder engagement is key. And therefore, on this, I have a question that is, what is your, how do you select the stakeholder that you engage in your project? Are they mainly public officials, or do you also engage private sector, civil society, or other levels of government in your process?
Yeah, great question, Stefano. Thanks for that. So it's open to it's open to cities to decide who they think should be around the table, and we have in our toolbox some mechanism for them to help them through that sort of stakeholder analysis process. So who should be here, who's missing, why are they missing, who are the easy ones to engage? There's a range of things around that. Maybe the easiest way is to give you an example of a project. So a project like Biocanteens, led by the small town of Montsaltou in France, is looking at replicating ways in which we can transfer their very successful use of public procurement of food in public canteens to carry 0-kilometer food, organically produced local food. So using public procurement to shift that whole sort of food systems approach. Around the table there we have food producers, so small and medium enterprises, including farmers, distributors. We have public officials involved in quality assurance around food, procurement processes within the local administration. We also probably have school canteen staff. We might have people working in delivering the food. So and we know that they are real people around the table, some of whom are not normally involved in public sector type meetings. So you need to think about businesses are not very comfortable turning up for very traditional experiences. So again, it challenges us to think about what are successful ways of engaging them, successful ways of using the assets they bring. So that it is genuinely an attempt to be 360-degree, which I have to say is not always easy. But it's and the key question is, what difference does it make? Does it give us better results? I mean, ultimately, that's the acid test around that participative model. We think it does. We believe we have evidence that shows that it does. So we will be retaining that as a core part of our approach in the new programming period.
Yeah, and just probably to complete what you were saying, Eddie, from the experience of Urbact, but also from what we have seen in this report, that is also this definition of the multi-stakeholder is something that should be adapted along the way, following also the evolution of the project or the strategies. I mean, it's not just that you have a fixed picture and a fixed composition of a group, but this is something that might evolve and need to be evolved along the time. I will bring Sorge in if she has some comments on this, and otherwise we will move to the last part of this conversation with Stefano. Sorge, do you want to add something on these aspects?
Yeah, maybe just a short question for
Please.
Eddie. Thanks also for presenting this great work. We also refer to it gladly in our handbook. But this is with the emphasis on the participatory approach, which is clearly super important. You would like to, I imagine, as a city, to include civil society, to include residents. And then do you have any good practices of how you can reach beyond these usual suspects, people who tend to, which is great, but who tend to react earlier to a call for information or a call to for participation, but there are certainly groups that you want to reach that are not so easily reached, but that are actually very important to involve.
Yeah, again, short answer, and I think, I know that we've got rich experience amongst some of the speakers already, some of the projects like the Bridge Project and the Clearing the Limbo Project, as well as the kind of work that we do at Urbact. So looking at who are we trying to engage with, what's the issue, so and things like using trusted intermediary organizations to connect with people, holding events and in non-traditional spaces. So going out into spaces where people feel comfortable, thinking about times of the day, people have caring responsibilities, or they're in employment. How do we make this easier for them to participate? How can we use smart new digital tools with groups like younger people, for example, with migrants and refugees? What are the language barriers? How do we get around those? So, I think already we've got a fairly rich set of understanding, which is never closed, of course, and this point about dialogue and kind of continuous learning really matters. But I think I'm sure they're mentioned in the Chorus report, which I haven't had a chance to read in detail yet, obviously. But those are some of the things that our projects are doing just to try and make that a more effective way of involving those harder to reach stakeholders whose views are as important as anyone else's.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let's move to the last conversation with Stefano Marta from OECD. As I said, he's the person leading the work of OECD on localizing SDG. Again, let me just say that as for the other speakers here, again, the perspective of Stefano is very important for us because it allows us to, first of all, to connect with the wider global landscape, linking the work that is done at the local level by our project, by the UIA project, also with some major strategic policy development and objectives, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the new urban agenda, which has been adopted a few years ago in Quito. So, Stefan, the floor is yours. Tell us a little bit more about your work at OECD, and then as for the others, we will have a couple of questions for you.
Thank you, Raffaele, for the invitation, and again, congratulations for this great report. My name is Stefano Marta, and I'm the coordinator of this OECD program on a territorial approach to the SDGs. The program was launched, as you mentioned, 2 years ago at the Level Political Forum, and has 3 main objectives. And as you will see, the data indicator monitoring component is both a standalone component of this program, but is also cross-cutting among all the other components. The first component of our program is to support cities and regions in using the Sustainable Development Goals as a tool for improving their local development policy, plans, and action. So here the idea is that the Sustainable Development Goals are a compliance agenda, and they could even be considered as a monitoring and evaluation framework for the performance of countries, cities, and regions. But at the same time, there is a big opportunity for government at all levels to use them for improving the local development plans and policy. In particular, for example, as was mentioned before by Urbact, to break these silos among sectoral policies, or to engage with the civil society, or to engage with the private sector, that are all using the SDGs as a tool for their actions. The second component of the program is specifically on the monitoring framework. And here we developed this component for a very simple reason, because we saw that, for example, from the Millennium Development Goals, it was not enough to monitor progress just at national level, but we really needed to monitor progress also at sub-national level to capture these territorial disparities and avoid that maybe national average can mask these disparities. So we decided to develop an indicator framework that is currently supporting 600 cities and 600 regions in OECD countries to monitor the progress towards the SDGs. And this is the second figure, the measuring distance tool. And for each city, for each region, you can see, and also in aggregate terms, you can see how the cities and regions are progressing towards the SDGs, basically. And what we saw here is very interesting, because one of the findings was that there are huge disparities within countries, disparity in monitoring, in achieving the SDGs, and also that cities and regions are not on track to achieve the SDGs. There are 80% of the region and 70% of the city in the OECD countries that are not on track towards the goal, towards any of the 17 SDG. Then to support, to facilitate the city and the region to use our data set, our monitoring framework, we developed a web tool that is the third figure. It is an online tool that everybody can access, and where the city can just put their name, and they will see how they are performing comparing to the national average, compared to the other city and region in the same country, and compared to the OECD average. And in addition, we also, because we also believe as Urbag that this peer-to-peer component is very important, there is also the web tool will identify 3 peers for each city and region, and will allow to see how the city that is under assessment is performing compared to the others. The third component of our program is specifically on peer-to-peer learning, and what we did is to create a community of practice, both with 11 cities and regions that are working with us on this program as pilot, but also with a broader community of cities and regions that are working on localizing the SDGs. And this is why every 6 months we organize the OECD roundtable of cities and regions for the SDGs. And finally, one of the final results of this program is this checklist that you can see in figure 4. Basically, this checklist is the final section of our report that you also put in the chat, and is providing OECD recommendation on how to localize the SDGs. And we identify 5 key blocks that are, we believe, are fundamental for localizing the SDGs. One is policy and strategy. The second one is multi-level governance. The third one is data and indicators. The fourth one is budgeting and financing. And the fifth one is stakeholder engagement. So I think I can stop here, and I look forward to your question and the discussion with the colleagues.
Yes, thank you very much, Stefano. It's very interesting also to see how you are applying beyond, let's say, the more, let's say, theoretical discussion and process. You are also applying a number of very proactive tools in order to make sure that this capacity among peers and among beneficiaries grows along the time. I have just a few questions regarding data, which I understand is also one of the basic, let's say, raw material which feed the whole process. We are a bit late in time, so I will just ask you the question, and I'll probably very briefly bring Sorge and Eddie in. My question regarding data to you is, well, the first one is related to a weakness that sometimes we also find with our project regarding the importance of having baseline data, because sometimes it's the point from where you start, and in many cases we have projects saying we don't know this starting point. So how important is to start having data even before starting your intervention? And the second one is, and that's something which already came up in the conversation so far, is about this data triangulation between qualitative and quantitative data. How important is to have both? And from your experience, probably what's the most difficult part of the data which city struggle in getting?
So I think it's absolutely fundamental to start with a baseline, and this is also what we did with our program. We developed this indicator, we co-developed with this indicator framework with our 11 pilots and during our roundtables, because this was the starting point. We wanted to go to the cities and to the regions having an idea of which are the challenges and the opportunities that they are confronted with in terms of sustainable development. And what we did is, one of the challenges, of course, is the lack of data at the local level, in particular if you want to measure a global framework like the one of the SDGs that was designed not specifically for city and for region, and many goals are very national or even international. So what we did was the first step was to understand what is place relevance. So out of the 169 target of the SDGs, we really made a selection of what is relevant at some national level. And then we also, given that the focus of this project is very much on OECD countries, we did an exercise of understanding what is OECD relevant. And we came up with our indicator framework. Of course, there were many data gaps because it was impossible to have all exactly the same indicator as the one of the UN indicator framework. So we had to use data proxy. And another important point is that since the beginning, the message for us was that this data baseline is important, but we didn't develop these tools for creating rankings, but to use the indicator as a tool for policy dialogue. It's really important at the end for us is that these data are useful and are informative and they inform the policy. So we didn't develop this because we want to say that London is better than Paris or vice versa, but because we want to inform and promote a dialogue between them. And finally, it's also important to promote a culture of monitoring and evaluation framework, because sometimes in specific projects, like we work a lot on decentralized development cooperation, we saw that in decentralized development cooperation project, the idea of monitoring and evaluation is really not there, and therefore this data and also the way we use data, the way we communicate data, so the idea of having a web portal or a snapshot where we just don't have their hard statistics is also important to create accountability, transparency towards the project. And finally, very quickly on the qualitative and quantitative data. At OECD, of course, for many years, we work a lot on hard statistic data, but more and more we really see the importance of integrating this with the qualitative dimension, in particular when we do this policy dialogue with the cities and the regions. So our indicator framework is the baseline, but then we go in the country and through interviews, through focus group work, we really try to capture also this qualitative, this perception dimension, or this information related to governance, to power relationship, to which are the perception of the local population, or which are the concrete challenges for a city that cannot be captured sometimes by the quantitative data. So we really try to integrate both dimensions when we prepare our final reports.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefan. It was hyper interesting. I will probably just pick one point which you made, which again has been resonating in our report, in GRC report, and also by Eddie, which is also this need to visualize data and to have them aggregated, but visualized also somehow in simple form. And what we see, for example, in UIA, it's clearly two paths there. One is the visualization, which is meant to be a support for decision making. So more and more city leaders, politicians are asking to come up with a way of visualizing data. For example, we have those on air quality type of project where it's very clear. And then, of course, there is the other way, the other dimension, which, of course, they are interlinked, which is about also making them more pedagogical and making them more open also to outsiders from the more internal group of people, which of course raises accountability, transparency, and raises also the ownership of some policy intervention with the wider group of stakeholders and beneficiaries. So I think this was a very clear point that, again, I think was present in all the conversation that we had today and was also part of the lessons that we had. Eddie, Sorge, we have 3 minutes left to raise some more question or comments regarding data, which, I mean, it's a central component of our discussion today.
I mean, just to brief things, I know we're running up against the clock. I was struck with you saying, Stefano, that 70% have not reached, are not where they should be. And, that opens up a conversation we don't have time for today about how stretching the target should be. And if the targets are so stretching, we know we're nowhere near them, what do we do? Do we say, oh, well, we'll go back and we'll make them easier? Or do you find ways to, it's the psychology of the measurement tools and how you then use that in your collaborative work at the multi-governance level. So, I mean, when you're talking to the guys who are doing self-assessment stuff and they realize they're not nearly where they should be, how do you react to that as an organization trying to support them and to move them forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really key question. What we did in our evaluation, in our indicator framework, is to set this target using the 10% of best performing cities and regions by OECD countries, because the key message for us is that we should be very ambitious with the SDGs. And therefore, if some cities and some regions are achieving this target in the OECD countries, this is something that possibly can be reached also by other cities and the regions. But this is, of course, these are technical targets that we identified. And we also believe very much that these targets are also a very political exercise. So each city, each region should identify its own target politically. So with our tool, we can provide some technical information on how the cities and the regions are progressing. But at the same time, it's very important that the political leaders define their own specific target and the way to achieve them. And in some cases, we saw, for example, that some cities and some regions have already achieved the target of the 2030 agenda. So, and this what does it mean? That you don't have to do anything more for a specific goal? Of course not, but it's an information that you are progressing towards a right dimension. So it's a technical and political exercise that we try to combine.
Grazie.
Great.
Okay, Sorge, want to add something regarding data?
Quickly seeing the time and also the points I found interesting were also touched upon already, but just very quick on the reliability of data, because do you do anything with checks or support with for authorities to have any kind of assessment on this? Because often people are very happy already to have data, but it actually can be very misleading if this data is not reliable. Is this in any way incorporated?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have two processes for the data quality check. The first one, that is the OECD official one, is that we receive the data from our member countries. So we receive the data from the National Statistical Institute of each member country every year with a questionnaire. So all the data are validated by the ISTAT or INSEE and so on every year. But sometimes when you work with the city, maybe they don't recognize themselves very much with some information, some data. So what we do is when we work, for example, with a specific city, we use this indicator coming from the National Statistical Institute, but we also use the specific indicator that the city are providing us. So we try to combine both information, because maybe sometimes some data are not captured in the national statistics or some data. For example, when we develop our web tool, we had to use exactly the same indicator for all the 600 cities and 600 regions. So we had to do a selection of data and indicators. And therefore, when we work with the countries, we want that with the city, we want that all the specific information is captured. So we really combine the two processes. So the city validate the data, but the official way to do it is through the National Statistical Institute of the member countries.
Okay, thank you very much. We could continue this conversation for more hours, but thank you so much, because I think that we together we achieved the objective of this panel, which was really to open up the conversation, to link to other initiatives, while also contextualizing this our report. And I think that here the underlining message is clear, which was the message we have given from the beginning, and I'm sure will be repeated now in the closing remarks. Today, for us, it's not the end of the story. Today is an important milestone, but we really believe that the content and all the work that we did so far will be inspirational for other cities. And for this, we need to join forces with other organizations in order to make the case, and also to make also our content and our messages stronger and more reachable for city. We are just 5 minutes late, which is also a big achievement. I will now give the floor for the closing remarks, first of all, to François Gallagher, who is the person within the DG Regional and Urban Policy, who is in charge of UIA, so he's our counterpart interlocutor over the daily implementation of the initiative. And then after François, we will have Tim Caulfield, the director of the Secretariat, also saying a few final words. François, the word is yours.
Thank you very much, Raffaele, and good late morning to everybody. I hope that you hear me well. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to say a few words for the closing of this webinar that has been indeed very interested to follow from DG Regio's perspective and from the, especially as policy officer in the unit dealing with urban and territorial issues, that is directly responsible for the following up of the implementation of the urban innovative actions, of course in close partnership with the Région of France. I would not, let's say, take the risk to be here pretending to summarize in few minutes the essence of so inspiring and rich debate that took place this morning. I would actually love that it continue a little bit more since that was especially on the most complicated issues so interested to follow. But I would just rather a bit more, perhaps modestly, only share with you my few takeaways, and starting first, perhaps by the reasons that I would find to be particularly satisfied, again from DG Regio's perspective, of what I heard this morning. Well, first to say that your debate sounds a bit like a confirmation that of the strong convictions that we have here in DG Regio, that the experimentations that are taking place in UIA projects are fully valid as an inspiration for the design of future programs, and in particular for the fundings that will be invested in sustainable urban development strategies. And from this perspective, of course, I really support what Soce was saying, and you also, Raffaele, to continue on the work that is starting today with the publication of the study itself, to see what kind of linkages can be made with the handbook on sustainable urban development that we have developed together with GRC, indeed precisely at the attention of cities and of managing authorities. And it's only a start, as you said, because what is valid for monitoring and evaluation is also very true for a number of other considerations. And there, I'm pretty sure that Tim perhaps will give you more hint on what could be the planned activities that we have in the near future to enter into other dimensions, such as we heard this morning, integrated approaches, the take of UIA cities for the just and green transitions, for instance. And this is a dynamic that, of course, we are very much willing to systematize further in the future with the new instrument in preparation, the European Urban Initiative, that we, of course, in strong partnerships with our key allies and partners in the program URBAC, we will be trying to further develop in the future as a sort of common and integrated set of support activities for cities over the coming years. If I come back now a bit more focused on the topic of today, I would like to stress that that the emerging reflections also from the study, especially when it comes to the complexity inherent to monitoring and evaluation in dynamic innovation processes, very much coincide also with the findings of another study that has also been recently published, which was the first external assessment of the urban innovative actions, which obviously I very much encourage you to look into as a complementary reading. What we came across with this first assessment is that, the added value of UIA projects, on the one hand, very much lies into this diversity of experiences, of type of innovations, of outputs, events of methodology to connect data on to monitor projects. But the same diversity also, well, constitute part of the limitation of our current model in a way. So the resulting recommendation from our consultants there for the Commission to also, well, try to intervene in this process by defining a number of minimum indicators, output and result indicators in our future course. That would be, in a way, of course, a recommendation that we would like to follow, but in a way that would not constitute an unnecessary straitjacket, I would say, for the innovative process, but to distillate a bit more, well, to boost this logical framework approach that Storge was also referring to, as a way, as a sort of precondition for result orientation, which is, as you know, very important for any public investment policy, and of course, the European budget does not make exception from this point of view. So, what to do better in front of all these challenges? I noted a lot of very inspiring ideas this morning. Of course, I will not be able to mention them all. Well, here first to start with this idea to try to involve at the very beginning the evaluator only on. And I like, from this point of view, the formula that was made by Eddie to start by the end in mind when we prepare our project. I think this is very much already in the DNA of UIA, because we selected the projects not only because of their innovative nature, but also because of their ability to put in place a robust measurement system. But I will also take that we should still keep in mind this success factor against indeed tendencies that we probably might all have to think indicators on impact rather at the end of a course of actions when arbitrations on investment priorities are already made. A second very important idea that I noted concerns this participatory approach with regard to evaluation, to make sure that the discussions on results, on debates concerning the criteria to determine success is not an exclusive debate for specialists, researchers, or decision makers, but also includes the views of beneficiaries, target groups beyond the usual suspects, as it was also say this morning, as a way to, yes, to introduce some qualitative elements also in the design of the beginning of the desired effects that we want to measure throughout implementation. It might be interesting here perhaps to make the parallel to signal that one of the novelties within the future cohesion policy, when it comes to this new objective of Europe closer to citizens, is precisely to introduce some metrics that would allow us to monitor integrated territorial approaches, isolated perhaps as far as it can from sectorial dimensions. When we will be carrying out, of course, this monitoring, the idea would be to precisely introduce a number of indicators, such as, for instance, simply the number of stakeholders involved in the design and running of sustainable urban development strategies. And of course, this is a logic that we would like also to reinforce at project level, that will be financed under these strategies and by definition for future innovative actions. Well, very important as well, of course, that can be mentioned in relation to the presentation that our colleagues in the OECD was made. I tried to find out the right set of indicators both at strategy and project level to follow up issues that would be both locally relevant, but also in synergy with our global challenges. You know, most probably is that our President von der Leyen is made already a very strong commitment from the Commission perspective to integrate SDGs in Commission strategic analysis and in annual country reports within the European semester. And this is, of course, a logic that we will be willing to very much push at every level of decision making in Europe. Beyond this, well, perhaps this is where I would reach the end of my short notes. Right now, it's this famous, as you was calling it, Raphael, is this famous data triangulation and never-ending debate on qualitative versus quantitative data. Most probably, we will always need both. In any case, to demonstrate that innovative actions are not only, let's say, successful from the point of view of opening new horizons with regard to policy learning, but also more simply to show that they constitute efficient and sustainable ways to use taxpayers' money into investments that may be seen at first sight or at short term as creating a quite heavy financial burden. This is what we said and can be seen perhaps as conservative in some way, but resonates to this dimension of accountability that remains part of the equation in all circumstances, not only vis-a-vis of auditors or of the clarity that the Commission would need for the budget discharge, for instance, in front of the European Parliament. But it's also part of what we discussed this morning, these pedagogical dimensions that we mentioned, the communication efforts that we owe to European citizens. And in a way, as a must also to explain that a new solution tested under the European Urban Initiative is worth replicating elsewhere in Europe, which is also a fundamental objective that we are trying to achieve. This is where, and I will probably finish on this last point, I would like to really express my gratitude to the UIA cities that participated to let's say, to feed this indeed extraordinary work that has been put, that is now available on the UIA website and platform. And congratulations also to the UIA Secretariat for this, in spite of the very last minute also adverse consequences, circumstances, as I understood. But well, in a way, we very count on this continuation of collaboration and of the support of the UIA cities to help us, well, to try to make the long story short, in a way, meaning that they help us with their expertise gathered through experimentation in order to allow us to digest and capture all the complexity of evaluation into narrative that would be, for us, both credible and straightforward to enable us to communicate on the results of the projects once they closed. The monitoring and evaluation platform opens very promising perspective from this point of view. I'm sure there are a lot of people that we need to thank for this really interesting debate this morning. But I hand over now perhaps to teams that will do it much better than me. Thanks a lot for your attention and for the great work.
Thank you very much, Francois, for your words and also for bringing us this perspective, also from the Commission point of view, which is extremely important for us. Team, yeah, the floor is yours for the final words.
Yes, it's really a thank you. I won't stay very long because we're a bit late in the agenda. To give everybody a thank you, those for the attending. I think there's still 120 odd people here. So hope this has captivated everybody in terms of monitoring evaluation, particularly the evaluation part of our projects and what we've been doing. Thanks also to the panelists. We had Eddie, Soja and Stefano. Thanks for your time, sharing also your experiences and your best practice. Particular thanks to Ecoris, Marie-Jose and the team, as well as the UIA team, Heraclis, RAF family and Orphaly for putting this together. I mean, over the last year, I remember when this was all set up, it was before the Coast, Marie-Jose, she said this earlier, it's before the COVID period started. So already there was quite a lot of work to actually get the tender up and running, the recruitment of Ecoris as the people leading it. But then within the first month probably, there's the COVID crisis, and so a lot of the work has been done digitally and a long way from the actual projects, and has given us some kind of not just the technical issues we've seen today, but also the issues of not actually meeting people, really conversing with people face to face, which is obviously easier than doing it digitally anyway. However, we've come up to a result. We've come up to a very good result, I think. I had a look at the website yesterday, no technical issues yesterday, and it was a very interesting piece of work, very interesting discussion and elements that have been brought from our projects and the cities, who obviously we wouldn't be here today without. So there are practices, there are case studies, experiences, tools that you'll be able to see. We've got videos, we've got discussions, as I said, as well as written text. So please go on it. Please go onto the Knowledge website, Knowledge Lab that we've got, and take your time to go through it. So this is a glimpse that we've given you today, but please take your time to help you in, and let's be honest, this is about the innovative context. So our monitoring and evaluation study is around innovation and innovative projects, and how innovative projects can learn from what they're doing. So really it's around doing something different, and how a monitoring and evaluation can help that and improve that. As Francois said, there are a number of next steps. You've got the platform online, obviously, that you can go on now. You've got the Knowledge Lab that you can see the knowledge that is coming out of our projects. They're starting to close. So we've got over 20 projects that are starting to close, and the knowledge, the continuous knowledge, is being captured by actually all the 86 projects that we've got. So please use this tool. Please gain from this tool to help you also in delivering what you need to deliver at your local areas. Next activities are housing. So we finalised the housing activity with URBAT this year. There's a sharing event on the 22nd of April that obviously please attend if you're interested in that subject. We also got the mobility report. We've done a piece of work on mobility last year as well, so that is going to be online very, very shortly. And then for 2021, we've got, I think Francois already highlighted this, the Just Transition piece of work that will be starting very soon. We're just at the moment doing the concepts for these pieces of work. There's the piece of work on integrated approach, and also on the consequences of COVID-19 in the delivery of innovative projects. So there's the kind of three main capitalization, capacity building activities. And finally, there's the transfer networks, and we've been working with URBACT and the Commission over the last few months, and URBACT have launched a call for projects on transfer networks for UIA projects, and results of those will be available very soon. So thank you for attending once again. Stay safe, and we hope to see you very soon in the other events as well.
Thank you very much, team. It's my turn to really thank everyone for having, well, first of all, the participant for having attended this webinar, all the speakers and all the people that have been working behind the scene. So again, please visit the website with the page of the report. Eventually send us comments or remarks that you want to do to us. And again, thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.